Hey, good morning. Pete, North Las Vegas. One of the few firearms related channels that is not monetized, doesn't advertise, doesn't shill, doesn't ask you for your money. I don't want it. I got my own money. I'm primarily on YouTube just to share information and learn from others. So what are we doing today? We're going to put this A2 receiver together. We're going to put the rear sight on, forward assist, and the ejection port dust cover. So let's get started. I'm telling you what, I get so tired of this crap. There's Aero Precision upper parts kit. Everything for the ejection port cover door is complete. The E-clip was pre-installed on the rod from Aero Precision, so that's good. It's there. What's missing is the pin for the forward assist. Got the assist, got the spring, and no pin. Luckily, I have spares, so we can press forward with this project. it's everything now. It drives me nuts. So for those of you that may not know, on an A2 receiver, the forward assist pin and the rear sight pin are the same. So on the receiver, this pin and this pin are the same. Let's take a closer look at these pins and see if they're worthy. Okay, so I thought we'd do some close-ups. And I always dress these things up whether they need it or not. So I'm going to chuck these up in my portable drill, and we'll just kind of smooth them out with a file and some sandpaper. Okay, so they didn't look too bad. I would be comfortable pounding them into the soft aluminum receiver, but we're going to make them better. The rabbit will now come out of the hat. I repeat, the rabbit will now come out of the hat. Okay, we'll get some cold blue on there and touch up that shiny metal, and we'll start putting this receiver together. Damp paper towel to get the excess bluing off. Shot them down with some oil. We are ready for install. Okay, interesting fact. Aeroshell 33 and Aeroshell 64 are both lithium grease based. 33 and 64 are almost identical, with 64 having additional additives for extreme pressure. So I'm just going to use some white lithium here, and we'll get this forward assist pin area lubed up a little bit on both sides. Something else I thought I would also mention is I have an easier time for me coming in on the bottom installing the pin. And the one time I tried coming in from the top, and I don't remember why I did, I ended up having an issue where the pin wouldn't go all the way through. I'm not sure what all the reasons were for that, but after I tapped the pin back out and came in from the bottom, it went right in. Now on a flat top, this is really nice because you can put your flat top, face that down, and help support the receiver to get your pin in. So anyway, we'll be coming in from the bottom and get this forward assist in. Okay, so the way I do it is using my starter punch. It has a hole in the end of it that fits over your pin and just helps you control things, kind of like not dropping it on the ground. And what I do is I'll tap that pin in, and I'll get the pin to where it just starts to show inside the bore, and we're not anywhere near there. And then for those of you that haven't done this before, your forward assist pawl, the little hooked end, that's going to face your bolt carrier. So it's going to go in this orientation here. And then we don't want to forget our spring. All right, so there's some things I feel comfortable showing, some things I don't. We all know how YouTube is. But I have this supported by a piece of wood underneath the rear sight. It fits about right. This is a glass table, so I shouldn't be doing it here, but whatever. I have this on the reinforced metal part of the table, so we should be okay. All right, let's get this thing installed. Okay, so I got the pin in far enough to where we have the assist captured, and ran out of room using the pin starter. You can see getting ready to hit the receiver. So from this point on, you can use a larger punch, a straight cut punch, and tap that in, and be careful you don't beat up your receiver. And then you can use a smaller straight cut punch to get the pin just below the receiver. And if you use the right size, you won't damage your receiver. But my preferred punch for this part is this roll pin punch. Focus. You can see the tip on there. And that'll keep your punch center because it fits into the end of the pin. So we're going to use this. All right, so I'm going to tap it in, and we're going to get it just below flush on the receiver. Double check everything for freedom of movement, and this part will be done. Okay, so before I go all the way through and get that pin where I want it, we want to double check on the other side and make sure that it properly lined up with the hole and it's coming in where it's supposed to. That's grease in there. It's kind of hard to see, but it's lined up and it's coming through okay. Like I said, there was one time where I came in through the top and I ran into problems with it lining up on the other side. So looks like we're good. We'll get that fully tapped in, clean it up, and take one last look at it. Okay, so on the bottom here, we're just below flush on the receiver and almost centered with the top. On this particular pin, I don't worry too much about being exactly centered. And this is going to be good enough. I just really don't want to push my luck. So what I'm going to do is, this is the side that I was using the punch on. So we'll get some cold blue in there and touch up that shiny metal. Spray it out with some brake cleaner. And it's all good. Okay, so this A2 rear sight is from Fulton Armory. The maximum spec here is supposed to be 1.105. And you can see we're coming in at 1.110. So we're 5 thousandths larger than we should be. Or we're 5 thousandths out of spec. And I've already dry fit this, and we talked about this in one of the previous videos. Even though it's a little bit out of spec, it will fit on this receiver without interfering and rubbing up against here to the point where it won't work. And so it'll be fine. But I just thought we'd mention the specs and how this one is 5 thousandths out. Okay, so first thing for the install is we take our 2 halves, make sure that the indexing set screw pin is installed and that it's flush on the top. And then we put the 2 halves together. And right now we don't care where it's at. We'll get to that a little bit later. And then the next thing we're going to do is install the detent, ball bearing, and the spring. And I'll be using a little bit of grease. And that's going to go right there. So let's get that installed. So getting the spring dropped in the hole, it can be a little tricky. And I just use a toothpick So I'll put the spring on end of a toothpick. I'm going to put a little grease on it. We'll drop it in, and then we'll put the detent ball on top of that. Okay, so we're going to slide our drum into opening here, and you can see it's going to hit the little ball bearing detent. And once I kind of get it up against the detent, I can come in with something and just kind of push the little ball bearing detent down and slide the drum in. So I'll do that off camera, but you guys can see what needs to be done. Maybe if you want, you possibly could come in down through the top and push that ball bearing down. Generally, I just come in with something on the side and push it down. So on your rear sight housing here, you can see the slot. That's where this pin's going to go. So that pin's going to go through the hole on your receiver and then line up through that slot. And but before all that happens, you also have to install your spring. And then I'm going to talk about this slot again when we get ready to actually put the pin in. And we have another ball and a spring. If you go by the U.S. Marine Corps manual, if you have two different size springs for whatever reason, one of them's a little bit longer than the other, they recommend that you put the longer spring onto the sight housing and the shorter spring on your drum. Okay, so we'll get this detent and spring installed on the rear sight housing, that hole. Once again, we'll use some grease, and then we're going to dial this down a little bit. And then, like I said, I'm going to talk about that slot one more time. Okay, we have our spring and detent ball in there being held in by grease. We're going to jockey it into position, and then we're going to thread it into the drum. Okay, so before you start, pounding your pin in, you might want to dry fit all this and make sure that you get full range of motion before you actually capture this with the pin. Now, I cranked that, remember that slot I was talking about? Okay, you can see the slot right there is only partially showing. So I don't have this down far enough yet for the pin to clear the slot. Now, the reason that I don't put this down any further than I have to is because when I put the spring in and have to collapse the spring to drive the pin in, this is less distance that I have to compress the spring. Okay, so if I crank this all the way down and then drive the pin in to capture the spring, I have to compress the spring quite a bit more. So this is a trick I discovered on my last build to where I just crank that down. Let me see if I can get this on camera to get that slot fully exposed. Okay, you can see that now that slot is coming down, and now we're just about fully exposed. And then maybe I'll just go a few more clicks just to make sure that we have a clear opening. Okay, so we have a clear opening all the way through, but you can see that we're not all the way down. And like I said, I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but when we drop the spring in the bottom here and collapse the spring to drive the pin in, that's less we have to compress the spring. All right, I'm going to set up my tripod and do the best I can to capture the install on this part here. So before we get the spring into the bottom of the rear sight housing, I'm going to start the pin. And what I do is I'll tap this pin in, and we get into the slot of the rear sight house. And I try to knock the pin in just far enough to just barely either just capture one of those coils so that when I compress the spring, it'll pop around the pin, or I just get the pin to where it's just making contact with the spring. So we'll get this started, and then when I get my tripod set up and we get some good light going, I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about on the inside. So let me get this pin started and make sure we just get into the slot of the rear sight base housing. Okay, so I have the pin started. You should be able to see that the pin is not coming into the the internal bore of the sight base, not yet. So I'm going to tap it in just a little bit more to where we can just see it inside there. And then we'll put the spring in, compress the spring, and tap the pin the rest of the way in. Okay, so I gave the pin a couple more light taps, and you can see it's just coming on inside the bore there. So we'll drop our spring in and compress the spring and tap the pin in the rest of the way. If you want to do this like the easy way, they sell tools. Fulton Armory has one, I think, for like 25, 30 bucks. Looks like it might work. It will help you to do all this, but I'm going to show you the Marine Corps way. Using a punch makes it a lot easier to drop it in there. Okay, I was going to show the actual install, but I thought I better not. We all know how YouTube is. So you can see I have my screwdriver wrapped up with some electrical tape. You want to find a blade width that's going to fit inside the rear sight post and not damage it. And then I just compress that spring. And then with my third hand, I come in and tap that pin in until I capture one end. And then I'll pull the screwdriver out and we'll drive the pin in as far as I can over to the other side. Make sure that the pin lines up with the hole on the other side, and then finish putting it in. So I'm going to do that part off camera. Like I said, I had second thoughts about actually showing it. So we all know how YouTube is. Okay, so with some really gentle taps, you can see the pins in there, and we got about half the spring captured. And I'm going to keep tapping it across and make sure that we're lined up with the hole on the other side. Okay, so the pin is just kind of hung up a little bit on the other side of the spring there. And because my screwdriver no longer fits in there, I'm going to use this small punch to come down and compress that spring. And compress that spring a little bit more, and then tap the pin in to get over the top of the other side of the spring. And then, like I said, we'll double check to make sure that the pin is lined up with the receiver bore before we tap it in any further. Okay, pins are in and we're flush. And I'll come back with some cold blue. And we'll do one last flyover on the receiver before we end the video after I get everything all touched up and beautified. Okay, so now we have to index our drum. So at the beginning of the video, we showed that set screw indexing pin that locks these two together. So now we have to come in and unlock it. Now with your top drum sitting at the 8-3 mark, that gives you access to the set pin through the top here. So you can see our Allen wrench going through there. And if you look between you can see that allows you access. So we're going to back that set screw out, and we're going to come down here and rotate the bottom in the down direction until this bottoms out to the nearest detent. So let's get the set screw apart and we'll show that. Okay, so I took the set screw all the way out. You don't have to. You can just back it out enough to where these will spin independently. So now what we're going to do is take this bottom drum and we're going to go all the way down with the sight housing to the nearest detent. So once I spin this all the way down and get this flush with this, if I can't get to that last detent all the way down, then I will back it off to the nearest detent. So we're going to rotate that in the downward direction, and then we'll get that set screw in with some fresh Loctite. Okay, so I'm all the way down as far as I can go. It won't go any further, but I'm stuck in between detents. So what I'm going to do is go in the up direction to the nearest detent. There it is. Okay, so that's bottomed as far as we can go and still be in a detent. So we're going to make sure that the top drum is lined up, and then we'll get our set screw back in with a little bit of fresh Loctite. All right, so we'll do one last check just to make sure everything's good. And there it is, bottomed out. See, we can't quite get to that last detent, but the way I have it indexed, there it is. So now that's all good. As far as fitment goes, a little bit more play than some of my other builds, but this is not bad. It's not bad at all. All right, well, we'll get this door on and call it good. Okay, so if your barrel's already on, you can put these on from the rear, but you have to tweak it past your forward assist. And like I said, it'll go on. I did it once before, but it's much easier to put this door on from the front when your barrel is not on. Okay, so I make sure the E-clip is on first. And if you launch this somewhere, good luck finding it. Okay, sorry, Aero Precision. I found the pin that I thought was missing. It was sitting inside my door. My apologies. You guys weren't missing anything. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, we got the door on. There's a lot of videos on YouTube that show you how to get this spring on. It can be tricky. Nice tight fit. When that wears in, it'll be perfect. All right, so I'm gonna get this whole thing cleaned up. I'm gonna go back and hit some of the shiny metal on the pins. I'll do one last flyover. Everything installed without a scratch. Okay, that's the side where I drove the pin in from. You can see no receiver damage. Tiny bit of slop here, not much, just a little bit. I think I mentioned earlier in the video some of my other builds. This is turned out to be a little better fit, but this isn't bad. Isn't bad at all. All right, Pete, North Las Vegas. Over and out.